Okay, so I wanted to ask you, what rivalry would you say in the SEC is comparable or bigger than uh, the Ohio State Michigan rivalry? Because I heard you say, didn't you go on a little spiel or rant or whatever in the beginning that the SEC all bow down to the SEC?
I was able to spit all that out while having tongue planted in cheek. So if you didn't
no,
recognize that.
no,
So
I'm just, I'm doing the same thing. So I caught you in the middle of that speech. Anyway, so
the answer would be Alabama Auburn. That would be the answer. So
oh, so you think that's bigger?
no, you asked me if there was one, if
Oh, so you
there
think
could
it's
be an
comparable?
argument, if there could be an argument made for one rivalry in the SEC that's bigger than Ohio State, Michigan, that would be the one that would be the best one to put up against it.
Okay, so do you think it's comparable, or do you think there's a legitimate argument that it's bigger? Because those are two different things.
Well, I will steal a line from our buddy Beano Cook from a long, long time ago, and I think it still holds true. He one time said, and I don't know when he would have said this, maybe sometime during the 90s, that the Ohio State Michigan rivalry is a better rivalry. Alabama Auburn is a more bitter rivalry.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah.
You actually agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay,
How
when
much
was it?
time have you
Wait.
spent in the South?
How much time have I spent in the South?
Yeah.
Uh, a lot. I have family
Okay.
in North Carolina, Louisiana, been down
Wow.
to Georgia, been, I mean,
Okay.
kind of list on. I will say I haven't really talked to a lot of college football enthusiasts down there. In fact, the time I've spent down there, I've rarely come across anybody wearing a Georgia or Alabama shirt.
Okay. Yeah, so I would just say, based on my experience, that yeah, it's just different. It's different because it's in state for one thing. So I those
Them Georgia
people
Bulldogs.
anyway.
I was
It's
trying to do.
in
I was trying
state.
to
We're
do. That's
talking
my.
about Alabama and Auburn.
That's
So
my
so I
best
don't know that
Southern
they
accent. That's my
I don't know
best
that they
Southern
say
accent.
that at
Sorry.
the Alabama Auburn game very often. But um in state, it's an in state deal. Like you have more confrontations between people every day in the same school at the same workplace that are Alabama fans versus Auburn fans. Um, I was driving one time from Ohio, where I was visiting, back home, my home at the time in Mississippi, and I do have a slice of each. I grew up in Ohio, lived in Ohio for years and years and years until I was about 25, 6, whatever I was at the time. And I lived in Mississippi and I just didn't live there. I covered the SEC. So I lived it every day. I was at the campus every day, ballparks, news conferences, locker rooms, the whole deal for 7 years. And it hit me when I was driving from Ohio to Mississippi in the middle of the summer. This is like in June. And as soon as I got within range of any radio station in the South, the deep South, I came across in the middle of June a entire sports radio show, 3 hours. This entire show was nothing but Alabama Auburn debate.
What
And I
year was
thought,
this?
does this go on in Ohio or Michigan in the middle of June? Yeah, they're different deals. And right now,
What year was that?
that was around 2000, something in that range.
And what year was that quote you read off? When did he state that?
Oh, I don't know. Probably in the 90s.
Okay, back then it would have been more relevant, but I would actually argue today, if you were to look at the rivalries, it's probably more the inverse, isn't it? Because you would say Auburn's been much more competitive, even though they win roughly 1 out of 4, 1 out of 3. That would be the better rivalry because the underdog has a better chance of winning. When you look at Ohio State, Michigan, and the dominance that has taken place from the Buckeye standpoint, but you still have, I mean, you can look up on YouTube the fights that take place on the field. I would actually argue more in the modern college football era. That's probably the more bitter rivalry, not the better one. Because
Yeah, it depends on what you're talking about when you're talking about better. If you're talking about better, meaning that the teams are better, the players are better, or you mean that the games are better. Those are two different things. You can have NFL players all over the place and have an lopsided rivalry. You can have better games. You could have two lousy teams like Indiana and Purdue have a big rivalry at the end of the year that nobody outside the state pays attention to, but they could have great games every year. So you can measure this a number of ways.
well, it brings in the most viewers.
Yes,
The game.
Ohio State, Michigan consistently brings in the
So
most
if you're talking
viewers.
about
Correct.
if you're talking about better from that standpoint, then yes. But bitter, I mean, when was the last time we saw Auburn, Alabama try to throw haymakers in the halftime tunnel?
Yeah, I don't know.
Although they probably have separate locker rooms, so that's probably not really relevant. But
yeah, and there's also a difference between the vitriol between the players and the fan bases.
I think there's more hatred in the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry than the Alabama-Auburn. I think the Alabama-Auburn rivalry, if there's hate, which there probably is hatred there, because there was some story about some dude poisoning a tree or something crazy down. Like they got crazy stuff going down there. But I think from a competitive standpoint, I mean, everybody saw what happened when Michigan beat Ohio State for the first time this last year in that scene. We haven't seen something like that in, I mean, what, decades maybe? And that's so much bitterness built up from losing to your arch rival for years and years and years. And you see it, I mean, and even when Michigan was getting punked and everything for years and years and years, you'd still see fights on the field. I guess I can't remember the last time that I've seen a full-blown fight happen between Auburn and Alabama. I haven't seen where dudes are throwing haymakers. That happens every other year in the Michigan-Ohio State game.
I don't necessarily know that that's a good thing or that really underlines a rivalry.
No, but bitterness. But you said that quote said that Alabama-Auburn is the better, or Michigan-Ohio State is a better rivalry. Alabama-Auburn is the more bitter.
I think, first of all, I think that was more directed toward the fan bases because, again, there's just more crossover between fan bases between Alabama and Auburn.